Hello, folks. This is your impeachment update for the 10th. Adam Schiff has decided that he's not going to allow any evidence into his impeachment inquiry as to whether or not Donald Trump's inquiries with the Ukraine were predicated on at least reasonable suspicion or maybe even probable cause. You got to think about this, folks. Donald Trump was executing on a treaty between the Ukraine and the United States. As the head of the executive, he is the person responsible, first and foremost, for enforcing the laws of the United States. And we have a formal treaty that says that when it comes to corruption and other criminal acts between our two nations, we're required to cooperate. It was signed by Bill Clinton, negotiated by him, and actually ratified by the Senate. It's a formal treaty. It's not an agreement. It's actually a treaty that was ratified through the normal process that the United States uses for those things. So what Adam has decided is that regardless of whether or not there was a legitimate purpose behind what Trump was doing, he's going to hear whether or not he did certain things, and then he's going to vote out articles of impeachment. Well, he ought to think about this long and hard, and so should Pelosi, because as soon as this goes to the Senate, they lose control over it. As I have pointed out repeatedly, there is nothing to stop Mitch McConnell from sending this thing into the Judiciary Committee in the Senate and then saying to them, your job is first to find whether or not there was at least reasonable suspicion or a better standard. In other words, probable cause, whatever. And if there is, then you vote out a no bill and we just, this thing dies right here and now. All right, now think about what the probability is that that's going to happen after you've had due process destroyed in the House. Very high, maybe close to 100%. In fact, I wouldn't bet against it. I think it's going to happen. And then what do you get out of the crazies on the left? Well, that's a good question. Well, let's talk about where the left is on this, where the nut job stuff is on both the left and right when it comes to things like Medicare for all and medical care generally. I wrote an article that was published this morning about this screaming set of parents yelling about the fact that their 5-year-old daughter will not get a $300,000 a year medication for cystic fibrosis if they can't force you, I, and everybody else to pay for it. They don't have $300,000 a year. Not to mention, this kid's 5. If she lives to be 80, you're talking about 75 years worth of this. You're talking about well north of $20 million that they think you should have to pay. Let me also point out that CF is an entirely avoidable disease. I know, this is a terrible thing to say. You're going to accuse me of eugenics next. No, I'm simply saying that in order for you to get CF, in order for you to suffer from it, you must have 2 parents who are both carriers. They must have sex, and you must lose the genetic lottery. Why the genetic lottery? Well, because there's a 1 in 4 chance that you're going to end up with both copies of the defective gene. And if you do, you have CF. If you don't, you only get one of them, you're a carrier. And if you get none, then you're not a carrier. But wait a minute. We know what the gene is. We've known what the gene is that causes this now since about 1990. And these days, it's not all that difficult to run tests to figure this stuff out. So these 2 adults, either through negligence or willful intent, remember this kid's 5, okay? We've had genetic testing available to the masses for longer than this. They could have checked. They either didn't check or they did check, they knew, and they did it anyway. It doesn't matter which the case is. The point of the matter is, this isn't some random chance event. There are a lot of those that happen, though, too, where we have some genetic linked disease, but we don't know what the cause is. But in this particular case, it's not true, okay? So now, all of a sudden, because this couple rolled the dice, they came up snake eyes, they've now got a 5-year-old daughter with a fatal condition as a result of this. Because they rolled the dice and it came up snake eyes, now they get to bill you $300,000 a year. You know, that's kind of like me going out and shooting my arm full of heroin of my own free will, knowing full well it's going to destroy my life. Now, I'm going to smoke some meth, too, so all my teeth fall out. And then after that happens and I have holes in the back of my esophagus and everything else, now I'm going to make you pay my $500,000 medical bill. By the way, I had a family member try to do that and sort of got away with it. She's now dead. But, it really wasn't all that different. All right. And yet, where's the culpability line? Well, I don't know where the culpability line is. But what I do know is this. The idea that everyone's woes, whether they be avoidable or not, whether they be self-caused or not, are suddenly chargeable to other people is a huge problem. And that's what we're really talking about here, folks. These people have woes, and all of a sudden, they are chargeable to someone else. This must stop. I don't know exactly how we stop it, but I know this much. The craziness that's going on right now within our government, if we do not put a stop to this kind of nuttiness within the health system and everything else, we're not going to have an economy or a set of markets left. It's not going to be there because it's going to come apart and blow up in our face. Anyone who thinks not, boy, are you stupid. Yes, it is. That is exactly what's going to happen. And yet we have, during this time, that these real issues are being discussed. And I put forward a way to solve this problem. You won't like it. I'll be called all kinds of names for it, I'm sure. I haven't been called a communist yet, but I'm sure the hate mail's coming. Okay? It's simply this. We're 5% of the population. Why does America spend more than 5% of the global R&D on pharmaceuticals? We should not. Every other country should have to kick in their piece according to their population. Because when you find things, guess what? They benefit everybody on this planet. Not just us, not just somebody else. They benefit everyone. So let's put it in percentage to our ratable percentage to our population, and none of this stuff's patentable. None of it. You can have it for the reproduction cost. And now we got competition, and guess what? This problem, for the most part, like with CF, goes away. Now, is that a radical thing? Well, for companies like Vertex, it would be, because it would put them out of business. They'd basically become pill mills reproducing whatever it is it's found. But isn't that better than the situation that we have today? I think there's a clean argument to be made that it is. And isn't this the discussion we ought to be having in America right now instead of this bullshit about impeachment? I think it is. Because you know what? The medical monster is going to eat this country, and it's going to happen within the next 5 years if we do not stop this. I don't deny that these two people are in a terrible amount of anguish because their daughter has a fatal disease. But it's a fatal disease that was foreseeable. And it was a fatal disease that they could have checked for before they got married. They could have decided not to produce children, or they could have gotten really, really selective about this. We don't want to go there, because I'll tell you what, there are an awful lot of people who think that testing fetuses in vivo, and then doing something about the ones that don't measure, that's boy, is that a eugenics discussion to have. But look, that's not my call. Okay, that kind of thing, by the way, is legal in the United States. People do test for Downs and things like this. Well, guess what? We now know what the genetic combination is that unlocks this disease. And if you happen to be a carrier and you sleep with another carrier, there is a 1 in 4 chance, and we know what it is, and we can test for it because we know what the gene is. Just nobody wants to do it. Nobody. Well, guess what? Why? Can you answer that question? Why? Why aren't we having a discussion about, okay, do we put in place a system that says that this is criminal negligence? Okay, basically you're screwing children. Or do we want to go a different route and say, no, it's not criminal negligence, but we're going to find a way to globally fund the research into these kinds of drugs so that they are available at the reproduction cost. There's no patents. There's no recovery of R&D expense because it's paid for by governments globally. And if you don't pay, you don't get. And don't get means you don't get anything pharmaceutical, not even antibiotics. And we will enforce that via whatever mechanism we need to use to enforce it because it's too important. Now, maybe that's a communist way of looking at things. Maybe. But maybe it's also the only way to solve this problem. So you have to decide. We as a society have to decide. Are we going to solve this problem or are we not going to solve this problem? Instead, we're arguing over whether or not Donald Trump, trying to get investigated, a man who bragged that he got a prosecutor fired who was investigating a criminal act in another country, ought to be impeached and removed from office. You people are crazy. I'm sorry, you're just crazy. And with that, I'll leave you for today.